you remember the time the Fantastic Four's own Human Torch, Johnny Storm, as portrayed by Chris Evans, single-handedly fought Galactus, repelled an entire alien invasion, restored his health with Maria Menounos, and still found time to participate in the events of the 2005 Fantastic Four film? I remember. That's what I do. I remember, and I do not interfere. I just talk about it.
Contrary to the fond belief of many, talk is not action. Hear me.
It was the year 2005. The Game Boy Advance was nearing the end of its run. YouTube was just starting. The Star Wars prequel trilogy had come to a close. And a big-budget Fantastic Four film had finally made it to the silver screen. Along with it, there were action figures, Burger King toys, tie-in comics, fruit snacks.
Fantastic Four Amazon cash cards.
And of course, since this was 2005, there was a tie-in video game on all major platforms. The Game Boy Advance version was an isometric beat-em-up developed by Taurus Games and published by Activision. You play as each member of the Fantastic Four, occasionally engage in some light computer hacking, and roughly follow the plot of the movie. As you would expect, along with the big bad of the movie, the game also tosses in some villains from the comics not seen in the film, with the notable exclusion of Galactus. They were probably saving him to be the final boss of the sequel. But all this is merely the prelude to our story, because a few months later, Activision released another Taurus-developed game for the GBA, Fantastic Four: Flame On, although you wouldn't know it by the main menu, which is on a more casual first-name basis. I don't really understand why Taurus and Activision released a second GBA adaptation of the Fantastic Four film months after the first one. How often did a superhero movie tie-in game get a spin-off? Not very often by my count, but I'm glad this one did. One of the most challenging hurdles in launching an FF game is probably the need to craft 4 totally unique mechanics for the 4-player characters. This game just chucks that requirement right out the window to focus on one single character, and by doing so, possibly becomes the best entry thus far in the FF's meager video game catalog. But if you're gonna give 3/4 of the team the boot, why stick with Matchstick Head? Any of the Fantastic Four could have had compelling solo outings. The Thing smashing stuff up, maybe a few rocket piloting levels in between. Mr. Fantastic's mechanics might have been complex for developers to implement, but would be interesting to play. Invisible Woman probably has the most similar power set to the Human Torch, with flight capabilities and ranged attacks. But of course she also has more advanced shielding and essentially telekinetic abilities, along with invisible sneaking mechanics. Heck, while we're at it, every member of the extended FF family could use a solo game. Some, like Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Hulk, already got that covered, but how about Shulky, Crystal, Scott Lang? They've all got worthwhile gimmicks, mechanics, and stories that would justify a neat game. So let's expand this meager video game catalog, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
But from the main cosmic quartet for a movie tie-in, Johnny feels like a bright choice. He's got a simple but nicely varied spread of flashy powers, flight, ranged and melee attacks, screen clearing abilities, and he's got a bold, fun personality to go along with it.
You know that look cool.
Although Flame On and its older siblings share the same designer and much of the same programming and art teams, it's a totally divergent gaming experience. In contrast to the more realistic, crunchier art style and isometric perspective, Flame On is a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up with occasional flight-based shooter levels. There's a brighter, more cartoonishly stylized pixel art style with vastly appealing color palettes and settings that stay fresh and never scramble my vision or induce a headache like some games in this genre can. The levels are gorgeously designed with delightful details like these snowmen that melt, or the moon slowly moving as you fly a long distance. Seemingly, the only apparent assets shared by these two games are some of the audio effects, including the titular cry of So on the whole, the game looks less like the kin of Fantastic Four, and more like a younger sibling to a 2002 GBA game by the studio, The Invincible Iron Man. While that game has more platforming elements, it's also a side-scrolling action game with similar art design and level structure. Iron Man and the Human Torch both have limited flight abilities, ranged attacks, and screen-clearing moves. Invincible has some nicely polished animation and visuals, and it received average or so reviews on release, delivering a fun experience of being Iron Man, with some drawbacks. The Mega Man-like game was considered by some to be a bit repetitive, lacking variety, and pretty short, as well as maybe seeming overly hard to artificially extend the playtime. Iron Man also lacked any melee moves, relying instead on repulsor blasts, and enemy knockback left something to be desired. But if the Invincible Iron Man was something of a spiritual first draft for Flame On, I'd say the latter benefits greatly from it, and is a strong advancement of that basic formula. Flame On is the first solo game for a member of the FF. The closest thing any of them previously had to a solo game was the very first Fantastic Four game, the Scott Adams text adventure, Quest Probe, featuring the Human Torch and the Thing, featuring the Human Torch and the Thing. Flame On, featuring only the Human Torch, presents a protagonist that is simple, easy, and fun to control. I'd say the game captures Johnny Storm's powers pretty well in the context of a side-scrolling beat-em-up, feeling enjoyably powerful with a solid range of abilities. You have access to flight, fireballs, very satisfying fiery punches with decent knockback, and massive bursts of plasma. One area that's a bit of a step back from Iron Man is that, unlike Tony Stark, Johnny isn't smart enough to duck. Perhaps this was a design choice meant to encourage more flying combat, and to encourage the use of your fireballs as a flame shield. The game's charming visuals also support the feeling of being a human torch. Check out this perfect superhero landing after you dive bomb. Even Johnny's personality comes across well in the game, which we'll see more of as we get into the story. The story begins at about the same spot the previous GBA game began, with the FF getting their powers in a cosmic storm, and it quickly becomes apparent that Johnny was far busier in the 2005 film than he seemed to the untrained eye. Like in the film, Johnny wakes up quarantined at Victor Von Doom's compound in the mountains. He has a flirtatious fling with one of Von Doom's employees, a nurse played in the movie by Maria Menounos, named Candy in both GBA games, which would have been super helpful for the person who did the movie credits to know. Also, in the sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, there's a woman at Reed's bachelor party named Candy.
Wow, you're really smart.
Thanks, Candy. That means a lot to me.
Coincidence? Here's where the story starts to diverge from the film. Instead of flaming on and immediately getting naked with Candy in a self-made hot tub, Johnny encounters a bunch of mean green soldiers from the Skrull alien race.
What in the... It's coming right for me! Flame on!
Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but it's nice to be up against grunts who aren't total randos.
Oh.
A lot of superhero tie-in games have you facing an ocean of run-of-the-mill boilerplate enemies, like generic robots, or garden-variety thugs. The prior Fantastic Four game had you fighting living museum exhibits, prison inmates, and its fair share of generic robots. But none of those cannon fodder enemies are exactly iconic antagonists from the source material. But here, the waves of interchangeable mobs are iconic antagonists from the comic lore, first making their debut in Fantastic Four #2 back in 1961, and making their first appearance on the big screen in 2019's Captain Marvel. Having familiar foes in this role helps envelop us in the Fantastic Four world, It's not a lot to ask for, but it's still a little refreshing coming from a superhero movie tie-in of this era. Granted, although there are no pushovers, the Skrulls in this game don't really do much of the main things Skrulls are known for, which is shifting their shape. There is little to no shift shaping going on here, unless you count the first mini-boss, who seems to have some kind of Wolverine claws and a Tom Cruise risky business slide thing going on. Still, they provide a decent amount of variety, coming in different categories: foot soldiers, gunners, grenadiers, and different color schemes, which might correlate to different strength levels, but frankly, I was too busy setting them all on fire to really notice. And did I mention, in addition to those other Skrull types,
They fly now!
this army of Skrulls is bent on capturing Johnny for his newfound awesome cosmic power. As for why only 1/4 of the team is in the crosshairs of an invading alien force, I have to assume it's because only Johnny snuck out of quarantine to go snowboarding with Maria Menounos. And the Skrulls better thank their lucky stars they ran into Johnny first, because if Reed was the main character, this game would have been over real quick. Johnny rescues Candy from the Skrulls, thwarts their attempt to kidnap him, and presumably gets naked with Candy in a self-made hot tub, believing the menace of the Skrulls to be at an end. He and the rest of the FF return to New York, where he flirts with another young woman, although he still carries a torch for Candy, if the innermost thoughts of his idol animations are anything to go by. But Johnny is shocked to find the city riddled with Skrulls, despite no one else seeming to notice. Maybe the Skrulls really are shapeshifted into human form, and one of Johnny's cosmic abilities is some sort of they live type supervision that allows him to see the Skrulls as they really are. It's here that Johnny encounters a winged beast that looks like some kind of rando reject from the Gargoyles cartoon. I'm just kidding, it's obviously Dragon Man, everyone's favorite draconic android who came to life one day through the power of alchemy. After what I thought was a tough but fun boss fight, Draggy drops a hint that something big's going down at a nearby volcano, which leads to a pretty good example of this game's humor. Whereas the dialogue in The Invincible Iron Man was pretty much all business. This is what's happening. I must stop this guy. I need to go here next. Flame On is significantly less terse and more playful.
What do you have to say about that now, huh? Hold on a second, what? You can talk? What do you mean, volcano? There's only one volcano anywhere near here, but that's a day's flight. Man, I had better get some frequent flyer miles for this. Why didn't anybody tell me there were at least 5 volcanoes nearby? My torch sense is telling me this is the one.
That was not a necessary gag to include, but I appreciate that they did. The story and dialogue of Flame On has more humor than I think would really be expected of a Game Boy tie-in game, and it enjoyably reflects the personality of Johnny Storm. It helps to make this feel like a distinctly Human Torch adventure, and I think it raises the overall quality of the experience. On the other hand, I'm not sure whose idea it was to have a volcano level where lava actually hurts the Human Torch. I understand every video game has lava in it, and that's a difficult obligation that game designers take very seriously. But why does the lava deal damage to Johnny? I don't know, maybe we can assume Johnny's actually drowning in the lava. Or the Skrulls put some other sort of anti-Johnny chemical in it. I await my no prize, Taurus. If it sounds like I gave that too much thought, let me tell you about the checkpoints. You don't really need a justification for a checkpoint unless you really want to be immersive. But here, Reed specifically lets us know that the checkpoints are scanners that copy your DNA and replicate you in an emergency. So, does this C stand for checkpoint? Or cloning? Every time Johnny dies in this game, it's actually a clone that walks away. There's a whole Ship of Theseus debate buried in this game's world building. And on the subject of emergency medical care, let's talk about Candy. This game already involves cloning, so health pickups could have been as simply justified as basic medkits. Instead, Nurse Candy is sprinkled throughout the levels to personally patch you up and cheer you on. In a sense, she's actually joining you on your adventure. It is neat to see how Taurus took this character with 2 minutes, 1 second of movie screen time, and expanded them into a core part of this GBA story, giving her a name, integrating her into the narrative and mechanics, and even bringing her back for the game's ending cutscene. Here's to you, Candy. You're a credit to your profession. Now, as I was saying, to add credence to my anti-Johnny Lava no price theory, the Volcano Island Gambit is all a trap anyway, leading to Johnny facing off against Terrax. Upon defeating him, Terrax feels used by the Skrulls, and vengefully tells Johnny he'll find the Skrulls at Earth's largest factory. Johnny doesn't know where the biggest factory is, so he goes to ask the biggest brain. We get another, technically unnecessary, but nonetheless delightful cutscene, establishing that the rest of the Fan Four have no idea where Johnny keeps running off to, and are convinced he's making up the alien invasion explanation. Johnny doesn't much care if they believe him or not, since he sees this as a personal war between him and the Skrulls, and heads off to the Gobi Desert, where Reed says the largest factory is located. According to the game manual, the Manufactory is an abandoned factory, long ago lost to the desert, which has recently roared back to life for the Skrulls to produce an army of robots. It was 2005, and this was the tactic the Skrull generals gleaned from their research into Earth's most popular treatise on combat, the Star Wars prequels. So, this level introduces a new wave of enemy, generic robots. This does nicely increase the enemy variety, keeping fighting fresh with different types and tactics. There are blade robots, and missile robots, and heat-seeking missile robots. Like the Skrulls, they also have different colors and seemingly different strength levels, but I didn't have time to write a field guide on the subject because I was busy turning battle droids into molten metal. The Manufactory is also where the Skrulls are holding Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, having captured him while he was hungry and weak. Johnny doesn't know what this big purple dude is, but he naturally assumes that if the Skrulls have him chained up, then he probably shouldn't be. I like this characterization of Johnny. Big heart, trying to do what's right, making a huge mistake. Probably his worst decision since that time he brought home a girl who was actually a bunch of bugs. Granted, the Skrull imprisonment of Galactus doesn't seem to have been particularly altruistic either. Galactus alludes to experiments they've been conducting on him that don't suggest they've been particularly humane, or Skrullane. And that checks out. Just look at the scientist presumably leading this ethically dubious quest for knowledge. He shows up for Johnny in a few lackluster mini-boss skirmishes, and thinks the first step of the scientific method is to blast the subject sky high. Even though Galactus loses style points for lacking consistency with the rest of the franchise, he makes for a fun and challenging boss fight. Without losing a life, you have to fight to free him on 3 different levels, as Skrulls, turrets, robots, and even Galactus himself fight back. And I think Galactus is fairly deftly characterized for a game of this type. He doesn't really want to devour worlds, he has to. He can't stop himself. And even he knows the galaxy would rest easier if Johnny didn't free him.
Why have you set Galactus free? Do you not know your actions? Do you not hear the planets once again tremble?
Listen, Bigfoot, I'm not sure what I understand. In the last 2 days, I've discovered I'm a human matchstick, I've been shot and skewered, and I've been chased across half the planet by angry green men who want to study me. And to top it off, I'm talking to a not-so-jolly purple giant. So why don't you tell me what you're doing?
Where Lucky Duck Johnny Storm really lucks the duck out is that, though hungry and weak, Galactus still has the wherewithal and fortitude to not just guzzle down the entire planet's life energy then and there. He sympathizes with Johnny over them both being hunted by Skrulls for their cosmic power, and just kinda flutters off on the wind, after telling Johnny where to find the Skrulls' hidden city ship hovering above the Earth. The Skrull City ship is a pretty cool location. It shows off some futuristic architecture and offers some environmental storytelling, hinting at the Skrulls' operations by way of what seem to be many captured humans suspended in tanks. Perhaps the Skrulls are studying them to better conquer them, or, given our extra-textual understanding of the Skrulls' propensity to shift shape, maybe these are humans kept in stasis while they're being replaced, as part of some sort of secretive incursion, if you will. But here, the difficulty spikes immensely, with the game throwing waves and waves and waves of Skrulls and generic robots at you. Hard ones, too. And even the Wolverine risky business dude who was originally a mini-boss. Now he's just another enemy in this level. It is a nice bit of enemy variety, but it's a steep challenge compared to previous levels. Fortunately, the developers seem to have left enough candy lying around to try to balance things out. Results may vary. And the final boss, while not exactly a super Skrull, is super hard.
Your costume too tight or something, Skrulls?
I was just thinking about how satisfying it will be to finally drain that tremendous power of yours. I am very, very hungry, and I've been waiting a long time for this.
So you're the one headlining the freak show.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am the general of the Skrull Expeditionary Force, and you shall suffer for the harm you have caused my troops. For I am Pybok, the Power Skrull.
Is this where you strike a pose and yell, "It's Pybok time"?
Pybok makes his first appearance at the very end of the game, but he has been mentioned earlier on and Johnny's been working his way toward him, so we've kind of had some build-up to facing the general behind this invasion and assault on Johnny.
I shall enjoy draining your body of its energy.
You can forget all about your Johnny smorgasbord, because this chase ends now.
Indeed it does, human. Indeed it does. Because you will give me your cosmic energy. I crave it. Now, die!
I thought Pybok was a pretty merciless, but kind of repetitive boss. As an old pro gamer like Reed Richards would tell you, you just have to look for the pattern and try again. Or, the cowl thing. There have been some solid pulls from the lore in this game, but somewhat surprisingly, Flame On doesn't touch on or make any references to Johnny's very particular connection with the Skrulls. Presumably, Pybok here is still dating Lyja and has not yet set her and Johnny up. But could you imagine how explosive the drama would be in a Flame On sequel? We were robbed. But for now, the Skrull open secret invasion is over. Johnny defeats Pybok, takes down the Skrull ship, and presumably rescues all the humans on board off-screen, just in time to resume the plot of the movie and take down Doc Doom with the rest of the team. Of course, you don't get to play that fight. You gotta play the earlier game for that. But what you do get is a post-credits scene assuring you that Johnny and Candy had a well-deserved break after secretly saving the world. The story of Fantastic Four Flame On isn't anything particularly thought-provoking, but I think it is more colorful and humorous than some comparable movie tie-ins. And because it is the extremely rare, and I dare say, only, instance of a Fantastic Four game without an appearance by Dr. Doom, it allows a number of other fun villains to take the spotlight. Doom may be the Fantastic Four villain and the comic book villain, period, but once in a while, his absence can be refreshing. While the game is longer than the Invincible Iron Man, it's still fairly short. And although it gets darn hard toward the end, instead of relying on difficulty to lengthen the playtime, it finds a number of ways to keep the experience dynamic and engaging. Invincible scattered a piece of bonus art throughout levels of the game to collect. And Flame On appeals to players' empathy by hiding 5 captured humans in need of rescue throughout most levels, encouraging thorough exploration.
Thanks, Johnny!
The The humans also give you bonus points, if you're remotely interested in playing to rack up points. These things give you points too? I thought they were flames, because, Human Torch. But the manual says they're space rocks scattered all over creation. I suppose a result of the recent cosmic storm. In addition to the points, the game also tracks the time it took you to complete a level. I know there were some speedrunners of this game out there too. I'm not a gamer who plays Flame On for points or speed challenges, but if that's you, let me know. The game also ranks your performance out of 5 stars to incentivize you to play your best. But it seems to be a pretty cool teacher grading for participation on a very forgiving curve in a total blow-off class. I consistently got 5 stars no matter how I played, apart from my abysmal performance in the snowboarding level. And that's another way Flame On improves on the Invincible Iron Man formula, breaking up levels with segments of different gameplay. Snowboarding and motocross levels, pulling from Johnny's extreme sports background in the movie, and the fun flying shooter levels. A simple skill tree also adds some additional strategic engagement by allowing you to choose how your cosmic powers increase over the course of the adventure. I found that these choices do have noticeable consequences, and there are more upgrade slots than there are opportunities to upgrade, so it does make you stop to consider your strategy and playstyle. Beating the game allows you to start over with your upgrades intact, which adds some fun replay value as you unleash your full fiery potential. It would have been nice to be able to choose to replay whatever level you wanted, the same way you can replay the snowboarding and motocross minigames if you want. Alas, there's no way to choose a level, apart from entering the secret button combo on the press start screen before it fades to the demo. This allows you to choose any level and gives you the options to play with invincibility and full power, which is fun. And isn't that what it's all about? It was the year 2005. The era of mandatory direct movie tie-in games was soon to come to an end. But before it did, there was this game. Even more unnecessary than the usual movie tie-in game. And yet, it uniquely delivers a fun and world-accurate little adventure in the Fantastic Four universe, doing exactly what Pybok failed to do, satisfyingly capturing the essence of being the Human Torch. Sure, GBA tie-in games are like the fast food of gaming, but I, for one, do love a good burger now and then, preferably flame-broiled. Thanks to everyone who made this game possible, and flame on. Thanks for watching. For more on early 2000s superhero cinema, swing by my Sam Raimi Spider-Man podcast, So Much to Tell, wherever you listen to podcasts. Tally-ho! Although the GBA game is definitely healthier than the burger.